Alright guys, so first off we're gonna create our ocean/water material, and to do that I've created this small test scene where we can test our shader. And yeah, first off I'll give you a brief explanation of the scene and then we'll go ahead and create our shader. So as you can see, I just have this simple box right here with a diffuse material and also some simple objects which also have diffuse materials. And to test our water shader, I have two different surfaces. One is a ocean surface, which was created with the ocean modifier. And it also has a vertex paint layer, which has the foam which you can create with the ocean modifier. And the other surface is just a it's just a surface which was created with dynamic paint. And all I did was, just add a dynamic paint, add a canvas, and add a waves surface type. And then just stopped the animation and converted it to a mesh. So that's how I created both of those test surfaces. Alright, so I'm gonna hide that. And by the way, I have a viewport ambient occlusion turned on, so if you want to turn that off, just uncheck this checkbox. And this is a new feature in 2.74, which just gives you context shadows in the viewport. Alright, so let's get started with our shader. So I've already prepared this group, so you don't have to create all the inputs and do all the naming conventions and that stuff. And so if you open the group, you can see you have 4 different parts. So this shader is made up of 4 different parts, and we'll just get started with the first one. So first we're gonna create our basic refraction and reflection shader, and I'm just gonna create it outside of this group and then just paste it into the group. So all I'm gonna do here is just go Shift A and then create a mix shader node, and then Shift A again and create a, glossy node, and Shift A and create a refractive node. And by the way, if you want to add nodes quicker, you can just go Shift A and then press the underlined letter right here to access that certain item of the menu. So for example, if I want to add a mix shader, I can just press M. Alright, and this also works of course for any menu. So if I want to go to movie clip editor, I can just press M, and if I want to go to the node editor, I can just press N. Alright. So if I just connect these shaders, I now have a basic glass shader. You of course could also just add a glass shader, but for better control, I just like to do it like this. So next we're just gonna add a Fresnel node and then plug that in as the mix factor. Alright, and then I'm just gonna add a reroute node and connect that to our IOR values and duplicate that node and plug it into the roughness value. So we can control all of our values with 2 inputs. Alright. If you want to hide unnecessary inputs, so inputs that are not used, you can just press Ctrl H. That's just a quick tip right there. And if you want to connect nodes and have the Node Wrangler add-on enabled, which you can find under the add-ons tab, and just search for node and then enable it, you can just press Ctrl and right click and drag to just connect nodes. And it will always try to connect the best input. Alright, so here we have our basic shader, so let's copy that and paste it in here. Here we have our refraction shader. And let's see, okay, that went out of the group, so I'm just gonna press undo and drag that in like that. Okay, so the next thing we're gonna do is create our absorption shader. If you've ever seen a Cycles tutorials about fake absorption or about a glass shader, you've probably seen this node setup, so I've already created it. So just go to groups and then absorption. And then you have your absorption shader right here. If you want a more detailed explanation, you can visit Blender Diplom, and they have a tutorial about this, and I'll put the link to that in the description. And if you also want to know more about Cycles nodes, they also have a book, which I recommend. Alright, so let's continue. So I'll actually give you just a 30-second explanation of what this absorption group does. So if you don't know anything about rendering, specifically in cycles, what happens is that the camera, when rendering, shoots out rays, and when these rays hit a surface, they either bounce off or they refract. So if I have a glass shader or a refraction shader, or let's say a translucent shader, they refract through the surface. And what we can access via the cycles nodes is, for example, the ray length. So as I said before, if I can press Ctrl H, I can hide unnecessary inputs. So that's why you don't see all these inputs with the light path node. If I press Ctrl H again, I only see the ray length output. Okay, so what I can do with the ray length output is access the length of this ray. So what basically happens is every time the ray bounces off something and then hits something, the shader gets evaluated of that object. So for instance, if I take this example, so the ray starts here and then hits this surface, so the shader network gets evaluated, then it refracts through the surface, let's say down here, it bounces off the box and then goes up again, so I have an evaluation here and then here and then here. Every time it's evaluated, it just, of course, goes through these nodes. So what happens right here is the following. So first off, we have our ray length and we have this backfacing node. So by multiplying with the backfacing output, what happens is that when the ray hits a backfacing object, or a backfacing normal, this turns true. So for all rays that are hitting a front-facing output, this turns to 0. So you can check what front-facing and back-facing is by just going into edit mode of an object and then turning on your normals right here. As you can see, these point forward, so this means they are front-facing. If I look inside the object, all the normals point outwards. Alright, so what does this mean? This means that for the first bounce, if you look at this, so at the first bounce it hits a front-facing normal, which means that this value will turn to 0. So this whole thing will just mean this ray length times 0. So essentially it's 0. And then this gets evaluated through and essentially will just means 0 because this first value was 0. So we get this first color value. And let's see what happens at the second bounce. So at the second bounce, what happens is that we hit a front facing normal. So again, the same result. And let's see at the third bounce. So at the third bounce, we can see we hit a back facing normal. So this is the first time the shader gets evaluated. So what does this mean? So what this means is that now this actually doesn't turn to 0, so we actually get the ray length, and all what happens here is just that the value gets remapped. And this is just done by the power node, and here it's inverted, and here we have a control option of how much the value is remapped. So if you don't know what remap is, it's essentially just the same thing if I were to take a color ramp and just remap our values. It's it's just the same thing here is done with the math nodes. All right, so what this means is that if we want to use this fake absorption, we usually want to have a volume present. So if I hide this mask modifier, you can see I'm using this volume right here. And if I go into rendering mode and let's add a refraction shader and connect that like that, you can see I now get this fake absorption. Let's turn that down a bit, or you can turn it up. All right, actually I'm gonna get my other surface and show you right there. And let's see, I have not enough bounces. Okay, it's on glossy bounces. Let's see. Yeah, it's probably surface normal issue. All right. So as you can see, I get my absorption, and if I were to hide this volume, so if I turn it into a surface again, you can see I don't get any absorption. So again, as I explained before, this is because, let's see, because if I hide the back surface, we essentially just get a front surface evaluation, which just means that we get the base color and we don't get any absorption effect. So in order for this fake absorption to work, you always have to have a back surface. And the reason why we still see it a tiny bit, even though let's see if I can show you this, even though we don't have a back surface, is because it's a indirect bounce right here. So as you can see, this bounce sees this surface as a blue surface because the absorption color is set to blue, and that's why we get this indirect fake absorption. But if you want to have a more noticeable effect, you usually want to use a volume with the fake absorption. Okay, so now we've got that covered. Let's copy it and paste it into our group. Let me quickly get that. Okay. Let's hide that. Okay. Again, I copied the wrong object. Okay, so I'm just gonna add it right there. So I've added the group, and I'm just gonna connect it to our refraction color. Alright, and then I'm just gonna connect all the inputs I've already prepared. So let's connect those to roughness, and the base color to the base color, and our absorption color there, and strength to strength. Alrighty, so yeah, I've got that. Okay, so now we can cover our volume shader. For the volume shader, you of course need a volume, so let's disable our mask modifier and let's just add a mix shader and then a volume, let's see, volume absorption node. And here I'm just gonna connect the inputs again, so volume absorption color to absorption color and density to strength. Okay, and let's connect that there. Then I'm also just gonna add a holdout shader, so all you have to do is press, let's see, what's that letter, oops, Shift A and then L to add a holdout shader. That node group. To unparent something from a frame, just press Alt P, and if you want to create a frame, just press Control J. Alright. So now I have those nodes, and I'm gonna connect my refraction / reflection shader to my actually no, I'm not gonna connect that there. I'm actually, yeah, just gonna connect that to our output surface shader, and then gonna connect our volume shader to our volume output. And in the mix factor right here, I've created 2 mix factor setups. So all this is a math node set to greater than and a value of 0.99. So all this does is that once the slider right here, this realistic absorption slider, is greater than 0.99, this volume shader gets evaluated. So yeah, that's all that is. And by the way, I'm doing it like this because we unfortunately don't have booleans or boolean checkboxes yet in our group inputs. So just plug that factor into the factor right here, and up here we have to create a color mix RGB. Press Alt D to undo that automatic insert, and then yeah, just create a color mix node. Also plug the factor into that, and then connect the base color into the bottom factor. So all this does is that when this this realistic absorption factor is set to 1, we of course don't want this fake absorption to have an effect anymore. So what we get here is just that it will take the base color instead of taking this input. Okay, so now we have our 2 shaders. So let's put that there. And yeah, we can actually test that. So let's connect those nodes. Okay, and as you can see, that works already. I'm going to quickly hide the mask and turn our realistic absorption off. Okay, turn that to 1. So if I set this to 10, you can see we get a green effect, which means our fake absorption is working. And if I turn the volume on and turn it to realistic absorption, I also get the same effect. Okay, it's a bit hard to see, but it works. By the way, if you want to have a more realistic mix, or yeah, a realistic factor of the fake absorption, you can actually tweak it to mimic the volume absorption node a bit more, and I've actually done that, but I'm not going to show this in the tutorial because all it is just messing around with the nodes and tweaking the colors right here in the absorption color to just match the fake absorption effect. So I've actually included this in the finished blend file you can download, and if you want to have a look at it there, you can. But yeah, I'm not going to waste time in this tutorial for that. Alright, so next up is our fake Caustics shader / shadow shader. Okay, so you can actually create, or I'm actually going to create 3 different effects or 3 different textures for our shadow shader that will then create our fake Caustics. So first, a brief explanation of how the fake shadow shader works. So I'm just going to create a mix shader, a light path input node, and let's plug the isTransmission ray into it, and let's see, a refraction shader and a transparent shader. Or actually, whoops, not transmission ray, we have to pick a, let's see, shadow ray. Alright. So as you can see, our shadow is transparent, and the reason for that is that, like I said before, the camera shoots a ray, and when it hits the surface, it will now evaluate this node setup, and when it's calculating the shadow, this shadow ray turns to 1, so what that means is now that our second input in this mix shader will be evaluated, which is just this transparent shader node. So that's why we get transparent shadows, so essentially no shadows. If I set this to black, you can see what this is, what the effect is. And yeah, for our camera, it will just evaluate our refraction shader. Okay, let's see, why isn't it showing? Okay, that is weird. Interesting. Let's see. Good to turn off something. Okay, something's wrong with this surface, obviously. Let's just check that. Oh, did I undo? Yeah, had to unconnect that volume plugin. Alright, so now we have our normal shader, and let's turn on that box. So this is how it looks. So how this fake Caustics shader works is as follows. So if you plug in something into our transparent shader, you will see that it will look like as if we had fake Caustics. So if we're actually going to create 3 different effects that we're going to plug into our color slot. So the first one is just a layer weight node. So if I take that and plug it into the facing output, you can see we get this cool looking effect. So you can use that for Caustics. If you want to remap it or add contrast to get more control, you can do that. But I'm actually going to skip this at this point. So what I'm going to do next is add a color and mix RGB node, and then a geometry pointiness node. So let's go geometry and take the pointiness factor. Actually, let's just plug it in right there. So as you can see, it didn't really change anything because we have to actually remap this value. So let's again take a color contrast node and plug that into here. And as you can see, let's plug that there. If I, let's say, change the contrast to 25, we get cool looking Caustics. And the reason for this is because, or the reason for this pattern specifically is because the ocean modifier. Since the ocean modifier is essentially just a mixture of different noise types that, yeah, you can just animate over time, we get this effect. And some of the noise types seem to be very similar to Voronoi patterns, and yeah, water caustics look similar to Voronoi patterns, and that's why we get this cool effect. Oh, this is a really new, or really neat feature, which uses the new pointiness attribute. Alright, so for our water Uber shader, I'm just gonna mix these different type of fake caustics effects. So let's connect this to our mix RGB node, and let's set it to multiply, like this. And the last effect is just a texture group I've already created called, let's see, where is it? Water shader shadow noise texture. So all this is a texture group with a Voronoi pattern, and the reason I have this is that for surfaces that don't use or that don't have this Voronoi pattern in its displacement included, for example our water surface, yeah, we might want this Voronoi pattern to show up too, and that's why I've created it. So if I plug it into the transparent shader, and yeah, to tweak the values, so let's set that to 5. You can see I also get this caustics, yeah, effect. So I've just created this node for special scenarios. Alright, so let's plug that in there and there. Okay, so now we can, yeah, just switch between all these different modes. But I, yeah, really like this pointiness effect. I think it's really cool. Okay, so yeah, let's take these nodes and copy them, and let's see. Yeah, the paste worked. Okay, and let's put that into this group. Let me grab that guy and turn off shrink for a second. And yeah, just make the group bigger. You can fit in all those nodes. Alright, let's move that there, here, and yeah. And just a brief explanation of this group. So all I'm doing here is adding the ability to move this texture on the X and Y axis. And I'm doing this by just creating a separate RGB node, which has the texture coordinate as an input. So all you're doing here is just yeah, feeding the UV coordinates into a color mix node or separate RGB node, which means you can then access the UV yeah, coordinates or space. And then of course you can just add values to it, which just means that the texture coordinates will then look up values which are of course either in the X or Y direction with a plus or minus, depending on what you set right here. And then I combine that again. So yeah, now I have here my new texture coordinate, which respects the texture movement or texture lookup movement. And then I add a color mix node with multiply, which then it's the same thing as just scaling a texture. So I plug that in right there, and the last step is just distorting our texture. And the way this is done is by adding a yeah, just a noise texture, and then adding that to our UV coordinates, which essentially just has the effect of yeah, displacing our UV texture coordinates a little bit in each direction, which then results in distortion. Alright, so let's connect our shader. Let's grab that and plug it in here. Yeah, as you can see, I've already created the outputs again, so let's plug those in. So texture coordinate there, there, the size there, distort factor, and distort size. Alright. Let's see where we have to plug in our shadow factor. Okay, let's see. Okay, so shadow pointiness factor, just plug that in right there, and contrast right there. and our shadow texture factor right there. Okay, now we have that. I've also added the ability to tint our shadows, so all you have to do for that is just duplicate this mix RGB node, set it to overlay, and then plug the color output into our, let's see, into our absorption color, and plug the factor into the, let's see, shadow saturation. Okay, I've got that done. Actually, let me minimize those nodes. Okay, and let me turn shrink back on. Okay, so the last thing I'm just gonna add is I'm gonna duplicate the mix RGB node and set it to multiply, set the bottom color to black, and turn on clamp, and then let's see, yeah, let's just plug that into our let's see, Caustics opacity. So here we just have a slider to generally tone down our caustics. And I'm actually just gonna create a math, subtract, and let's see, subtract, and let me see, yeah, just press Alt S to switch the inputs, and then set the top value to 1. So all this does is just inverts the input value. So yeah, you've just inverted our controls right there. Let's plug that in right there. Let's hide that node. Okay, and yeah, now we have to connect it to our main shading network. So create a mix node, so shader mix node, and let's plug it in right there. And then create, let's take our mix shader from up here and plug it in down here. And then, yeah, of course now we have to, like before, just limit it to our shadows. So I'm just gonna recreate that setup right there. Let's delete that, and okay, so again, let's take a light path node, plug the shadow ray in, and we're actually gonna multiply it. Let's see, multiply, and we're gonna multiply it by our factor, because of course we again want to control how much, control if we want to have our fake caustics or not. So I've plugged that in, let's minimize that, okay, and yeah. So that's basically our shadow shader. What I'm also gonna create is a preview shader, so we can have better control of our fake caustic effect. So all you have to do for that is just duplicate these two, let's plug that in again, like that. Then create a emission shader. Shader emission, and let's plug that in right there, and let's take our transparent shader, plug it in right there. Okay, and for our emission color, I'm gonna put that into the, or take the multiply value, and for our transparent color, I'm also gonna take that multiply value. And now I'm gonna just connect that shader to our shadow preview. Alright, so let's see what we've got. So now if I preview this shadow preview, I get my shadow preview. So let's test our values. So opacity just fades it to black. Shadow saturation takes it, fades it to, or overlays our absorption color. So let's tone that down a bit. Pointiness factor, of course, takes our pointiness attribute. And as you can see, that works. Contrast, we can also change that. Let's actually view our ocean surface. As you can see, we get nice caustics right here. Let's turn down the opacity maybe. Okay, and if you want to, you can also change or add our shadow texture. Give it a bit more randomness. But I'm going to turn that off or minimize it. Okay. So now we've covered that, and yeah, let's see. Turn off our realistic absorption. So yeah, this is what we've got so far, and the last step is to just quickly create our foam shader. So all this is, oh, forgot to plug the shader in right there. So yeah, that's why we are previewing our shadow shader. So now it should work. Yeah, now it works. Okay, so yeah, let's just quickly create our foam shader. So all this is going to be our, let's take a add shader, a diffuse shader, a translucent shader, because foam is a bit translucent. So let's plug those guys in right there. And usually you want to have your translucent color be similar to your diffuse color, but usually you want to have it a bit darker. And the reason for that is that, or if you don't know what translucency is basically when you have a light behind an object and then that light scatters through the object. So yeah, a really known example for that is, for example, if you shine a flashlight behind through your hand and then you get that red effect. So if I were to put this at the same saturation and value as my diffuse color, yeah, I would just have this really bright effect, and that's really not what you want because light gets absorbed. So you usually just take the same input as the diffuse color by doing this. So plug that, just create a mix RGB node and then multiply the color by black on, let's say, like 0.75. I'm gonna create a reroute node, plug that into the color, my color here, and yeah, just create a color that is a bit darker than our diffuse color. Okay, so now we've connected that. Let's plug that guy right there. Okay, and let's plug in our, let's see, our mix shader from up here. And let's plug this into our, no, wait, wrong input, or yeah, right input. So just plug this into our surface and let's see what we need. Yeah, of course we need our foam mask input, which is our vertex paint layer in our case. So let's just take that and I'm just gonna color ramp it. So I'm gonna take our mask output right there, connect it there, and yeah, just gonna put a few color ramps into that, and I'm actually just gonna copy and paste you what I've already done. So this is my node setup for this specific case. So as you can see, I just have a color ramp, then I'm just getting a noise texture, also color ramping it, and then just blending it over our mask. And then, yeah, I just take this result and plug the soft light into my mix factor, the multiply into my bump map, and then, let's see. Let's see. Yeah, I also have to take this color and pick it as our diffuse color and translucent color. And the last thing you have to do is just add this bump effect to our, let's see, to our, or actually, yeah, I'm just gonna add the effect of our foam to the roughness of our reflection and refraction shader because it yields a bit better result. So in order to do that, just add a math node, go up here, and then let's find our roughness value, which is right there. So add that to our roughness, and let's get our roughness right there. Okay, and let's pick that into the color ramp down here. So again, all I'm doing here is just adding a bit of roughness to the areas where the foam is. Okay, so let's connect that. Yeah. And now we have a complete water Uber shader. Let's see how that renders. Okay. As you can see, everything seems to work. We get our foam, we get our fake caustics, and yeah. If you want to, you can just play around with these values. So that concludes part 1 of the series. So in part 2, we're gonna create a shader which treats our objects that are in the water. And to just give you a quick preview of what that does, yeah, you can see it right here. So basically we just get a camera fall off, a fake absorption fall off, and so on. And yeah, I'm gonna explain more about that in the next part. So see you then.